If you want to support the Missing Witches Project, buy our books, New Moon Magic and Missing Witches, and our deck of oracles, the Missing Witches deck of oracles, or join the coven. Find everything you need to know at missingwitches.com.
You aren't being a proper woman, therefore you must be a witch.
Be a witch. Be a witch. Be a witch. Be a witch. Be a witch.
You must be a witch.
Happy equinox to the Missing Witches coven. The geese are leaving the lake. The leaves are starting to fall, and we've got this one day to celebrate equilibrium before we tumble into the dark half of the year. Fall winter is, of course, the perfect time to sit alone, wrapped in a blanket with a cup of tea, and start writing. So for Mabon, the autumn equinox, I've invited 3 word witches from across the USA, triangulated even, to guide us into and through our writing practice. Sanyu Estelle is also known as the Word Witch because of her deep love for word origins and word culture. Sanyu is a self-described pigmented, womanist, sissy, flexible, asexual, travel apt, and fashion forward SSJW, sarcastic social justice warrior. We love sarcasm around here. Love and light is great, but hey, give me your sarcasm all day. She is also a musician, singer, and lyricist. Her latest album, Shipwrecked, came out last year. And she's a tarot historian and card reader who promises the reading you need, not the reading you want. Her book, The Cultural Roots of Tarot, will be out in fall 2026. So hopefully we'll have her back on the pod to talk more about that next year. Send you open invitation. In her essay, I Am the Fight, Sanyu wrote, Black liberation does not equate to white supremacy. It remedies it. Kate Belew is an author, poet, and witch whose work exists at the crossroads of creativity and craft. She has taught and facilitated circles and workshops worldwide since 2017. Kate has an MFA in poetry from Sarah Lawrence College and is an initiated green witch, fully devoted to the magic of poetry and the poetry of magic. She's also the co-host of Magic and Alchemy, the Tamed Wild podcast with co-host Kristen Lisenby. Shout out, Kristen. Kate's new book, Word Witch, is a literary grimoire, a guide and companion helping readers through the alchemy of becoming writers, in which Kate reminds us that everyone is creative, everything is connected. Writing is magic. Word Witch is out October 7th and available for pre-order now. Publishers love those pre-orders, people. Charlie Claire Burgess is a self-described queer and trans non-binary author and artist working at the intersection of spirituality and queerness. A prolific author and deck creator. Charlie's latest book is Queer Devotion. Queer Devotion reveals that spirituality has always been far queerer than we've been led to believe. Queer Devotion's first line is, in the beginning, the gods were queer. And Charlie insists that they still are. Charlie's decks, too, reimagine archetypes beyond binaries. Their latest deck is Fifth Spirit Tarot. And just to put a fine point on it, they were, Charlie, maybe you can speak to this, were the host of the Word Witch podcast, and their IG handle is The Word Witch. So if you missed the title of this episode, use your context clues. Today we are talking about the magic of words. As Terry Tempest Williams wrote, a pencil is a wand and a weapon. And our guests today will help us learn how to most powerfully wield this wand and weapon. Please join me in welcoming the beautiful, the talented, the wonderful, the exceptional Sanyu, Estelle, Kate Belew, and Charlie Claire Burgess. Yay! Hi. Kate, I'm going to leave you to last because our listeners know you, and they know your work. So let's start with Sanyu. I want to start with this question we say all the time. You are under no obligation to be who you were 5 minutes ago.
Wonderful. I agree.
So I want to know, like, who are you today? Is there anything that you want our listeners to know about you before we jump into my questions?
Today I am still a soothsayer, truth teller, claircognizant, card reader. I have been actually, this is totally random thing to say, but it is on my spirit. Whatever that, when you went into the science store in what my niece calls the 1900s, and there was the pins thing that you stuck your hand into and it took your,
Yes.
what was that called? I am desperate to know the mystery of that because that's what I think of claircognizance as, right?
Please
Clear knowing.
expand. Please
It's
expand.
like I know what I need to know when I need to know it about what and who I need to know it about for as long as I need to know it, and then I forget it. So when I was getting into my craft, I'd be like, "Oh God, I'm not a psychic. Like I don't know things ahead of time." I'd like have angst about it, and then as soon as people sat down, I would know things, and I was like, "Oh, claircognizant is like that pins thing. It's like when you need it, and then it goes away." So
Oh,
that's who
I
I
get
am
it.
today.
Like it pushes through, but then when you turn it, they all
Yeah.
fall
It's like
back.
an impression. And then when
Huh.
people get up and go away, the impression fades.
I love that. That's what you want our listeners to know about you.
That's, yes, randomly.
Charlie, who are you today? Who were you yesterday? Who cares about yesterday? But you've done a lot of amazing work. So let's talk about yesterday and today.
Yeah, totally. Thank you. I think that the thing that I would add to your beautiful intro is that I'm actually currently working on a novel. So,
Ooh.
yeah, so I've got my two nonfiction books, and now I'm going back into fiction territory. I started as a fiction writer. I have my MFA in fiction, um, and wrote a lot of short stories, had some really cool success with that about like 10, 13 years ago. And then life took me in a different direction, and I
As it
found
does.
tarot, and all this happened and is still happening. So I'm like not going away from tarot or witchcraft or spirituality, but I am writing a queer horror novel. And I'm almost done. So
I mean, I want to get through our introduction. Sorry, Kate, you're gonna have to sit there on mute for another second. But there's so much, I mean, like this overlap of like queerness and witchcraft, and also this overlap of like queerness and horror in the sense of like monsters.
yes, 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 yes,
Ah,
absolutely. I have a essay coming out in the Rebus, which is a uh, literary anthology of creative writing and art surrounds like one tarot card each time. But it's like creative writing, so it's poetry and essays and short stories. It's not just like this is what the tarot card means, right? Um, and this issue is themed the devil. And so I wrote a essay on the devil tarot card as transgender liberation, and it's very much like that nexus of what you just said of like queerness. Yeah, Sanyu is holding up the Wheel of Fortune issue, which was I think was the first one. But yeah, it's very much that intersection of queerness and transness and monstrosity, but in like a beautiful, liberating I don't need to be what you tell me I need to be kind of way. So, yeah, totally. Which is also kind of what I'm
totally.
doing with my book. So,
I'm so excited to dive more into this because again, like, I gathered you all together as it were because you all self-identify as word witches, but you all have completely different practices and media and form and content and. So we'll get into fiction versus poetry versus essays versus Kate. Who are you today?
It's a great question. Who am I'm really happy. I'm happy to be here amongst word witches, amongst all of you. This is really, I'm just really grateful. I'm still and always have been a poet and a witch, and I'm here in Brooklyn, and my dog Banjo is here with us, and that's me.
I'm a poet with a dog in Brooklyn. I
The
mean,
the
you are
dream of my
living
younger self.
you are living many people's dream for sure. For sure. So let me start with the basics. And Kate, let's start with you since we ended with you. What is a word witch? Like, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to your practice? And like, what is a word witch? What's the difference between a word witch and an author, a poet, a lyricist, an essayist?
Mm. There are probably as many word witches as there are word witches, like everyone just being so different and, like you said, in their own craft. I guess to me, a word witch is someone who loves language, who believes in the power and the intention of language, who crafts poems or stories or storytellers, is a part of the larger lineage of creative ancestors, who wants to be a good creative ancestor, who takes the hand of the writers before us and throws the hand back. A word witch is a channeler. A word witch is a knower and a speaker. And we, all of us, can be word witches if we want to be word witches.
And what do you think separates an author, a poet, a lyricist from a word witch? Where does the magic come in?
I think that for me is like the intention behind it, and that like acknowledgement of that magic. Like I feel like all word witches can be any and all of those things, but maybe not all of those people would identify themselves as a word witch or do the work of the word witch, which is like giving honor to or working with that greater magic.
Edgar Fabian Frias said to me once, and
Mm,
I carry this all the time, is that what's interesting about witches is that we are self-ordained.
hmm.
And so I think that's kind of what you're saying. The difference between a word witch and an author is that intention, that decision, that, knowing even.
Yeah, and that's something too that I think writers are as well. Like I've always I remember this moment of Conrad Hilberry, a Michigan poet where I grew up, writing our names in third grade in our notebooks and then signing and dating it with the statement is a poet. And so we from that early age could like claim that word for ourselves, because I think that it's hard, it's a hard fight sometimes in this world to claim our names, but poet and writer and witch I think all have that in common.
Yeah, we'll come back to the liminal space of the blank page, but I do just I wanna suggest that at the top of the page, listeners, start with your name is a blank lyricist,
Hmm.
poet, essayist. Have that at the top of your page. I'm gonna start doing that. Amy Torek is asking Sanyu the same question. What is a word witch and why do you call yourself that?
Word witch, all of what Kate said, I agree. And also, I would say a word witch is someone who intentionally crafts language to deliver a particular message. I think the difference between word witchery and maybe being a writer, although obviously there's a lot of overlap because I think we're all writers too, and probably came into word witchery through writing, is your investment even before the writing and after the writing in what was said, right? Because as a word witch, I'll go back and like change things I've written when I change my perspective, or I will take things offline that no longer align with the identity that I have today, to the degree that you can take things offline. And I think the difference between a word witch and maybe any other kind of uh artist of words is you're how investigative and curious you are about like what you choose to say and what you choose to hear. Because for me, I was a kind of child who underlined words and highlighted words I didn't know, and then went home and looked them up in the dictionary. So there was that was always going to be a part of my character, whether I had found like craft or a pagan indigenous cosmology that then spiritually led me. And then maybe also I would say a word which is like intentionally spiritual.
Yeah.
And whatever that might mean across cosmologies and practices. So
I love also your interest in etymology, because it is this like digging and digging. We use words. I use thousands of words a day, but I'm not necessarily thinking about the root of the root of the root of the root. But we all know we're word witches, right? We know that language informs, if not creates, our reality via our perspective, right?
Yes, language is a spell for sure. And even when you get into the etymology of things like word or I have tattooed on my wrist speak on this one, right? And I have listen on this one. So
Nice.
like those still come down. I think a lot of people think of words in written form now that so many of us are literate. But obviously it was sounds and all oral telepathic communication, whatever our ancestors were doing way back when. So the reason I like the roots is because I like to see the evolution of words and if they still mean what they were intended to mean from the beginning and like how they have grown or not.
and how they shape our world, right? Like I remember I did a whole project when I was in school about the word virtue and the root of that being weir, which is like Latin for man. So like from this feminist perspective of equating manhood with virtue, um, and that's how we've been trained on language. Okay, Charlie,
Absolutely.
Charlie, what is a word witch?
Yeah, well, sort of piggybacking on what you were saying a moment ago, Amy, about language being a spell, as Sanyu said. I mean, it does. I think of language. Well, it shapes our reality for better or worse. It sort of defines how we understand reality, because when we make meaning of things, we make that meaning through language to a certain extent. And as writers as well, I think we all know the struggle when like you are looking for a word to describe something and just can't find that word. And sometimes it's because, you just don't have it in your vocabulary, but sometimes it's because it doesn't exist in whatever language we're using. And I think that that's something that multilingual people really have up on us. Only, I only speak English. I questionably speak Spanish and French, but like not really, you know. Um, like language defines what's possible for us in that way. And so I think that one thing that word witches do is play with that possibility, like have a heightened awareness of those possibilities, and the limits of those possibilities, and do what we can to bend those sometimes, because uh, language might sort of create our understanding, but it's not all there is. There's so much beyond that. And so I think that that's an important aspect when we talk about maybe being the difference between being a writer or an author versus being a word witch. There's a magic there. It's like our vocabulary is like a permeable membrane, and like I'm always trying to like sort of press beyond it to discover what else is on the other side, and then how I can sort of bring it back into my understanding or my readers' understandings. if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense to
Yeah.
me. Yeah. And I like that you brought up this, like, there's a difference between words and language, you know?
Yes.
Birds have language, trees have language, the mycelial network has language.
Mhm.
Um, we use words, but we also have body language. You know, if I'm sitting with my arms crossed and scowling at you, that tells you a lot more than probably a lot of the words that I could say. And sort of on this subject, like as we create the future with language, with words, um, you, Charlie, specifically, and Sanyu specifically, your work contends a lot with rewriting history. Sanyu, you wrote an essay called Rewriting History. Charlie, you're rewriting mythology, which it is history. You know, it informs how we have set up our universe. So tell me about rewriting history and the permission to do so, the desire to do so, the effect of doing so. Charlie, like, why did you go into these histories and like reclaim them and rewrite them? How did this happen?
Yeah, well, for me and for the work that I've done, I don't think of it as rewriting history, but instead as uncovering things in history that light hasn't been shed on previously. Especially when it comes to like my second book, Queer Devotion. What I'm doing there is like sort of following like the hints and traces and whispers of queerness or of gender nonconformity. Into the past and specifically into the sacred stories of the past, uh, because what's been handed down to us at this point has been written by mostly wealthy white men, you know, and like and all traces of anything that they would consider subversive have been filtered out of it. You know, it's been like they're the ones that rewrote history, not not us. And so I think of it as going back into history and trying to kind of resurrect what was there or what might be there, because unfortunately at this point it's impossible in some cases to go back and definitively say, you know, Sappho was a lesbian. I mean, I like she wrote poetry, love poetry about women. So like, I think that's enough to say that Sappho's a lesbian, but a lot of male scholars have argued that actually she wasn't because she had a husband. Just for an example, and I'm like, gee, no lesbian has ever had a husband before.
We're all collectively rolling our eyes in the Zoom room.
Yeah, precisely. Um, So yeah, I mean, I think that I definitely thought of the process of researching and writing queer devotion as one that was magical and also devotional. Um, and very much was doing it sort of like in cooperation with the spirits and the entities that I personally work with. And so it definitely was an act of word witchery, you know. Um, but yeah. Yeah, I'd love to hear what Sanyu has to say about this.
Yeah, and while you unmute Sanyu, you made me think of Enheduanna, who is, you know, our first known poet, a Sumerian priestess. Um, and a lot of her work was that devotional thing that you're talking about. And so I think that there's definitely room in our word witchcraft for just writing devotional. We think of like politics and we're angry about things and we're writing a letter to the editor or to our congressman. But like equally valuable for our world building are these like devotions to things that we love, whether it be gods or flowers or Sanyu Estelle.
I was going to say, or technology or
Technology, yeah.
oppression or whatever people are devoted to. So being born, bred, and buttered in Los Angeles, I tend to think, well, this version of me now and in the past little while thinks of history maybe more like cinematically, like a series of still frames that create a narrative. And yes, of course, there's the first take, the first direction, the story as it was brought to form, aka history. And then there is everybody else in that frame and their own perspective of the history, right? So rewriting it is reorganizing the frames and creating different sort of focuses and narratives within the scope of a tale, right? So, of course, we can see that in the most like fun and superficial ways, like Emma becoming clueless, right? And that kind of reinvention, right? Or you can see it in, you know, a history where we were like, and everybody in that town was crazy, and then you're like, oh, it was moldy bread or like a gas leak, or they were, you know, inhaling some sort of methane that was close to a cave that, you know, made them a little like different, you know. And then there's what I'm doing in the cultural roots of tarot, which is filling in gaps that people were just like, we're just going to attribute it to whoever we want, right? Because that's the last known place. But history is also how you organize your understanding by how you ask questions. And so if you don't ask any questions, there's very little to rewrite, right? But if you ask questions like, you know, I had a great upbringing in the church. I'm not Christian anymore, but I love my church. I still talk to people from my church.
Sure.
But as a young person sitting in the sermon, I'd be like, there's more to this story here. Like, why aren't we talking about other universes or galaxies? Like, what about aliens? What about dreams? You know, like my young self was like, this cosmology is not meeting my needs.
Yes.
And even though the community aspect is amazing, I'm going to have to fill in some gaps here because I have more questions than these people are answering. And then I found Taoism, and then I found Ifa and Isheshe, and then I had a bunch of dream kind of experiences that were very prolific. And then I had some like first contact kind of extraterrestrial situations that brought in a lot of perspective. So it's like rewriting history is choosing the genre, the narrative, the pace, the story that you're going to tell yourself about what is, right? And then whether you commit to that hook, line, and sinker, or whether you just let it be porous, like Charlie was saying, and you know, ephemeral and sort of evolve as it evolves. And whether you can contribute enough of the truth, because I do think that the truth is irrefutable, but it's also unknowable in its totality. So it's inherently paradoxical, right? But if you know enough of whatever aspect of the truth that you are perceiving at, your perspective may stand the test of time. And, you know, 1,000 years from now, we may see that in any of our works. And 1,000 years from 1,000 years ago, whoever decided to combine their forces to get the playing cards together and the major arcana together and have them arrive 100 years apart in Italy in this exact era where there was no political law because the Vatican had moved to Avignon for 100 years because all the papal states in Italy were murdering each other, and they were like, we don't have the time for this. And so, you know, if you're asking questions like that, you can find all kinds of things that are already kind of written actually and documented, but just haven't been included in the narrative in the same way like the Dead Sea Scrolls are not included in the Bible, in the same way that King Richard's story isn't included in the Bible, because if you knew his story, you might not be reading the Bible. But anyway.
Editor's note. Sanyu emailed me immediately after our conversation with that dreadful feeling we all know, the haunting of a verbal typo. She said King Richard, but meant King James. I, of course, assume everyone in the room is smarter than me, and I know next to nothing about Richard the Lionhearted, so I didn't question the slip. But here's the gem. Charlie replied in the email thread, quote, I'm sure King Richard wasn't a peach either, Sanyu. My personal theory about the King James Bible is that James, or his Jacobian PR person, commissioned it to distract from his many torrid gay love affairs, a detail I love sharing with Christians, end quote. And as Charlie loves sharing this detail with Christians, I wanted to share it with you. Now, back to the show.
So that's my thoughts.
I mean, thank you for bringing up the Bible, because this, if we need one example of how powerful words are, how powerful books are, like that's a great one. This book has, created the reality that many, 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 many people live in. And you also got me to thinking about this like butterfly effect idea, right? Like if we're talking about 1,000 years ago and today, and then 1,000 years forward, we are with our work rewriting future history, right? And so, Kate, I want to know, like, your book is coming out soon. And so, what's the future history that you want to like bring out of people? What would be the dream effect that your book would have on 1,000 years or 5 years or 10 minutes from now?
I love to think about that. The dream would be is that someone writes a poem because they read a prompt, and then maybe one of their future generations writes a poem because their grandmother was a poet, and then the poems just kind of like travel through space and time, and more people feel more creative and are more connected to that space of power and voice in themselves, and everyone claims writer and poet for themselves, and everyone is writing without wondering if it's good or bad.
Yeah. For the spring equinox this year,
Hmm.
I had our coven write spell poems, and
Mm.
then we recorded them spoken out loud, and that became the Ostara special for the podcast. And there were a few people in the coven who were like, "I've never written a poem before, and I'm going to do this for this." And I was like, result, I can retire happy. Like, I'm
Yes.
fucking Oprah Winfrey. You've never written a poem and now you're writing a poem. Like, I felt like my legacy has been solidified in this moment. Not that we're not carrying on and doing more and more and more and more and more, but just this idea to not necessarily be a world leader, but to inspire a world leader, I think is something that our culture has kind of pushed down. It's got to be me. It's got to be now. And it's got to be, it's got to be, it's got to be, it's got to be. But there is this idea, like we've all read 1,000-year-old books.
Hmm.
And so again, I just keep going back to the Sanyu's idea about like thinking 1,000 years in the future, and all of your books, all of our books, I'm one of you. All of our books might still be there. So I want to know from everyone, and if something comes up, just jump in. But let's talk about that blank page. How do you conjure the bravery to go from a blank page to a full page? Sanyu, you also made me think about the Mama Lola quote of her biography, not an autobiography, she didn't write it, of her biography. She said, "I hate the book because I change and it doesn't." And I say that all the time. And my cohort, Risa, is like, "Don't say you hate the book in interviews." And I'm like, no, I love our books. I love our books, but I change and they don't. And you were talking about, I can just pull that offline if I change my mind about that. But just wait, when your book comes out next year, you're not going to be able to do that. So
So true.
it requires bravery and imagination and. So let's start with Sanyu. How do you conjure that bravery to take the page from blank to not blank?
In my life, that didn't require bravery. It's something I did very early on. When I was like a a wee child, like below 5, before kindergarten age, my mom would read me to bed. And so my first formative book reading experience was Anansi stories. And so I asked her to teach me to read so that I could read that shit myself after she decided she was going to bed. And when I got to kindergarten, Miss Neal, great teacher, still think of her. We had like a painting hour, and I can't draw a straight line. And I remember going to Miss Neal and being like, "Can I write instead of paint?" And she was like, "You can write." And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Okay, then you can go writing." So, I learned to write early on. And I did that mostly because in a dream, I had some sort of like experience where some being was like, "You should write down your dreams." And I was like, "I don't know how to write." And so like I learned to do that. So writing my dreams down from an early age made the blank page more invitational, I think. It doesn't mean I'm always writing. I've definitely like put some things on the back burner that I are burning a hole in my head, and those pages are blank. But like I think the whoever gave this saying, like, the book writes itself. It's, I get inspired by doing the dishes. I have an idea. I stop doing the dishes. I go write the idea. And maybe I'm not writing on paper all the time now. Maybe it's a note or an audio note, but I'm always like constructing something. And so as long as I have some reference of a past versions of me's construction, this version of me feels very able to develop that. And maybe not always in the mood, okay? Maybe not always having the time, but always having the resource of something to say or communicate, even if it's just to myself. And I think, writing every day, whatever you're writing, maybe for people like us, is sort of inevitable. Like, communicative people communicate. And so there's always some aspect of writing, since that's such a huge part of communication now that you don't just have to call people. But I don't, it's kind of hard for me because I love to write. So it's never something that I feel dragged to do. That being said, I'm still in the research part of my book. So if you ask me this in October and November when I'm writing the book, I might feel differently about that. But I'll check back in on that question if it changes.
I remember during New Moon Magic, we had like sent the manuscript, and I discovered a little piece of trivia, for lack of a little fact. And I immediately went to our editor and I was like, "You have to let me put this in. You have to let me put this in. You have to let me put this in." And they were like, "Okay, we've got time. We do, don't freak out." But Charlie, like, Sanyu used this word invitation. Is a blank page a challenge for you? Or is it, like Sanyu says, an invitation to?
Mhm. I mean, the blank page definitely used to be a challenge for me. I, for me in my process, I've I tried to be one of those people who woke up every morning and wrote for X number of hours every single day or 5 days a week or whatever. And for me, I discovered that that's just not how I work. That's actually a great way to make myself burn out. Is if I'm trying to make myself do that when the fire's not lit, you know. And so for me, I've learned that like I kind of have to, wait for the inspiration to strike. And when it does, that's when I sit down. Like Sandy was saying, I'm doing the dishes, I get an idea, stop doing the dishes, sit down, I will cancel plans. I will write for literally 16 hours a day if it's rolling, like if it's because it is one of you, either Sandy or Kate, said something about word witches being channelers, and that's how it feels like when it's really happening. It's like it's coming through from somewhere else, or it's like riding me and I'm just like the bicycle and it's like, going somewhere. But that being said, at this point, like on with both of my books and with the novel I'm writing right now, I end up reaching a point when I'm far enough into the project that like starting the next chapter is almost easy. Like I sit down, I stare at the blank page, and then I just start like fucking around. And then eventually, something good starts happening. And I have been like writing this thing every single day for the last like 3 months. But then after I finish a project, I'll go like sort of like I'll lie fallow for a while. Like I won't write anything for like 2 months or something. I mean, other than emails or
Yeah.
Instagram posts or whatever the thing is. And I don't know. Like I love writing and I hate writing. Like I love it when it's working. I hate it when it's not working and it's like pulling teeth. And like I said, that's when I learned to sort of like if it's feeling that hard, I like close the laptop. I go spend a day reading a book or spending time with friends or taking a hike. I have to fill that creative well in order to keep producing. And then almost always, like the next day, I'll come back and then I'll be able to like meet that page again and accept that invitation. Yeah.
And neurologists tell us that our brains need like study and then unfocused, like a walk, like you're saying, doing the dishes, in order to really like synthesize information. Our brains need both. And of course, capitalism is like, no, you fucking work all the time and you never stop. And that's how you can become successful. But our physiology says different. Kate, is a blank page an invitation to a party or a terrifying oblivion? And also, I want to know, and from you, Sanyu too, do you have like I am at my desk from this time to this time, or do you just wait for the channeled spirits to tell you the poem? That's a two-part question.
Not afraid of the blank page. Like Sanyu, I've been writing I used to dictate poems to my mom like before I could write and she would write them down and they're in a scrapbook about like unicorns and fairies. Like those were like my first poems. But so that's always made a lot of sense to me. The sharing part for me is way scarier. Sharing my full page with someone as a like a deeply shy person, but I am more afraid of not sharing than the sharing, and so the sharing must happen. But and then wait, what was the second part?
The second part is like, what's your process? Do you have a practice that you stick to, or do you wait for the muses?
For my longer projects, I like map it out and I can't do time because I will play games with myself about it in my head and nothing will get done. But I kind of like have to like bait myself by being like, you can write 1,000 words and you can either go outside or the 1,000 words can take 12 hours and we'll sit here. Um, which has worked for me because then I get to go to the park and that's like my creative foraging space. Like I like to have that space to go kind of like do nothing or read or listen to someone else or something like that. But yeah, I can't do the schedule.
Yeah, I'm gonna use this phrase from Kate from now on whenever anybody asks me to do anything. I can't do time.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna leave it at that. This is
No one will
like,
argue with you.
I just like can't do time right now. I'm not sorry. So tell me, you are a poet, but now you are like an instructional manualist. So, and I want to know this from all of you because you're all write in different forms, in different media. So how do you decide what's going to be a poem and what needs to be a book? And what's going to be fiction and what is going to be, again, like, research based, like Sanyu, your book is going to be. And also, um, like, why did you need to write Word Witch? Why did you need to write Queer Devotion? Why do you now, Sanyu, need to write the cultural roots of tarot? Like Kate, like I'll start with Kate. Why did you need to write this book?
I feel like just after teaching poetry and writing in so many forms, I felt so called to make it more widely accessible and that someone could kind of like go on that journey for themselves without me in the room. Like I've taught seventh graders and I've taught in prison and I've taught in colleges and I've taught in retreats on the beach. And it's just been like, a whole spectrum of the human experience. And I've seen how writing can help people and change people. And so I wrote the book really because I feel like so many of my teachers and the writers that came before me supported me on my path. And if I could even just be like a single little stepping stone in the path like that, then it will have all been worth it.
And how did you go from, oh, I should write this book and I am writing this book? Because I think I should write that book is like everybody thinks that, but the people who actually go and write the book are not, the list is not that long. So, how do you get from idea to manifestation?
That's a good question. I feel like it was just like I'm doing this thing. Like I don't even remember there being a choice or like a decision. It was like I'm going to write this book. And it started out as like a little workbook that I had just for like my email list. It was just a few like poetry spells and prompts. And I think it just kind of like evolved into this bigger thing. I like found old like Canva graphics from like 2014 that were little like witch hats that said word witch under it. And so I just feel like it's like been the seeds have been planted and like the book was like always happening, if that makes sense.
It makes sense to me, Sanyu, Charlie. Have
Yes.
your books always been happening?
No, not for me. I mean, I'd really have to shout out Brittany Carmona Holt, because when she wrote Tarot for Pregnancy, Radical, I have it here. What is it called? So I don't butcher the name of it. It went, oh, here we go. Tarot for Pregnancy, a companion for radical magical birthing folks, right? So when she asked me to write the history of tarot chapter, I didn't learn to read cards through any sort of formal education. Just had a teacher read for me, and then I bought a deck and I messed around with enough decks for long enough that it started to make sense. So I didn't have any attachment to tarot history or anything like that. But when she asked me, I was like, okay, well, I could go at it from a word perspective, like I can be like, what is the etymology of tarot and like other words that were involved in this and stuff. And then just doing that and finding some book from the 70s that was like playing cards were originally called Mamluk cards. And I was like, Mamluk is not an Italian word. And like that led me down a rabbit hole where I was like, whoa, okay, calling it tarot Italian is an exaggeration. Definitely Italy had to do with bringing it together. But like, let's talk about 78% of the tarot deck being the minor arcana, which is basically playing cards with 4 extra cards that we call the pages. And so that is why I end up starting my book. But the kind of funny thing about that, to just reiterate things that Kate and Charlie have said, and you, Emmy, is like the idea is like a specter, it like haunts you, you're waking up with it, you're going to bed with it. It's like the creature on your back, and like you can marinate on it as long as you like. And we happened to be in quarantine when Brittany had asked me to do the first chapter, and then LA didn't just go through quarantine. We had the strike, and then we had the year after the strike, which basically means like LA is like Detroit without cars. Hollywood is our industry, right? So there's no business happening. Okay. And then we had fires. So I had a lot of time to be like, oh, can't do that job. Oh, can't do that. Okay, well, maybe I'll, write a book since I've been talking about it for so long. But something that Kate said that I think is so about the sharing, I actually think the blank page is an invitation for me, because I don't think I do my best writing until I share it. It's literally, I'll share it. I'll share a post. I'll write something. I'll share a newsletter, and then I'll reread it, and I'll be like, typo. I'm like, and I've read it 10 times, and I've read it out loud, and I've done all the things you're supposed to do. But it's
Babe,
something
I am the queen of
yes.
not seeing the typo until I've posted or submitted and like you say, I've read it 100 times.
It's something about knowing other eyes are on it and other minds are on it that I think shifts my perspective as I read it, because I talk about this actually in cups, like the suit of cups in tarot. I'm like, it's the suit of creativity and emotional intelligence, but like it's the suit of creativity and procreation and like romantic relationships, because a child is the most autonomous creation you can make. It's like made out of you. It doesn't have to give a fuck about you. It doesn't have to like you, talk to you, right? Like, but when you write the book, those are your words. And when you paint the picture, those are your painting, your brushstrokes. And like, there's an autonomy to writing too, especially with the internet and with like the digital writing, because people can copy and paste whatever aspect of it they want, and they cannot read the whole thing and interpret the beginning and then make an assumption about it, and so something about sharing it makes it much more alive and real to me. So inevitably I do think that publishing and writing books and all this was an interest of mine, but I'm actually kind of like Charlie in that I came up reading and writing a lot of speculative fiction. But because of my degrees being in sociology and political science and criminology and like all these other, like, I don't know, technical writing things, and me also liking to write and like enjoying language and looking it up, made me a good nonfiction writer, which is not something I tend and tried to be. But I think when you're in the church and you're a layperson and you have to do reading in front of people and learn these fucking words like, I don't know, Claytians and like blah blah. You're learning all this as Nebuchadnezzar. Like you're just reading all these things where you're like, what the fuck is that? And it makes you just a lot more. I don't know, if you're questioning, it makes you a lot more analytical. And so like this book, The Cultural Roots of Tarot, is only being written by me because someone else hasn't written it already. I was reading enough things to be like, why the fuck isn't this written? Like playing cards have been around 1,000 years. Like this is absurd. But the mystery is good for business, right? Like it's magical and I'm magical. And you're like, history is still magical if you like know it. Like it's not less magical because you know more shit about it. Like, and so I am writing it from a perspective of like as a service, and because I have the mentality to ask the questions for enough people that I hope, it stands the test of time. But like, I would not have gotten around to this at this time if I hadn't been asked by Brittany, and if 5 years of LA being down bad had given me other things to do. I would have probably ended up trying to get some fiction published first. But the amazing thing is I've tried to get fiction published for years and no one will publish it. And every time I write something about nonfiction esoterica, people were like, I'll publish this. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll go with the synchronicities. Who am I to argue with existence about this shit?
That's it. That's it. I do want to say, like, the Missing Witches project started because Risa had this idea about writing a piece of fiction where two women were doing the Missing Witches project, essentially. And then she was like, wait a second. I don't think this is fiction. I think I'm going to call Amy and we're going to do this, And so I pass it to Charlie. Your work, is it something that someone was like, you should write this book, or was it simmering forever, or are you halfway between Kate and Sanyu, where?
Yeah. I mean, pretty much I think all of my major projects have kind of happened by accident. Um, like my first deck, Fifth Spirit Tarot, I was just like doodling one night, which I didn't think I was an artist, by the way, before I made Fifth Spirit. Like I knew I could like do little doodles, but I'm not like trained, I just sort of figured it out on my own as I was making that deck. But yeah, I was just like doodling one night and drew an Ace of Cups, and I had like felt around that time that like if for like weeks leading up to that, like something big was coming, like something wanted to come through, but I didn't know what it was. And I think I actually drew that like on the Aquarius new moon or something as well. Anyway, and I like looked at the doodle, which was uncharacteristic of me because I almost never doodled back then. And was like, oh my God, it's an Ace of Cups. Am I right? Am I making a tarot deck? I don't know. Let's find out. And so then I just like kept doodling, and eventually it turned into Fifth Spirit. And when I did the Kickstarter for that, after all the art was made, I hadn't actually written the guidebook yet. I wrote the guidebook after all the art was made, and then the guidebook for the indie version of that deck just turned into a full-length book on tarot. Like, which was ostensibly about the cards that I had illustrated, but was very much trying to be its own book on tarot. And so then later, when Fifth Spirit got picked up by a publisher, I rewrote, like I made a smaller guidebook that could actually fit inside of a deck box instead of just like a full-length actual book. And then wrote Radical Tarot, which very much kind of like began as that original Fifth Spirit guidebook, but became its own thing, right? And Queer Devotion kind of like happened the same way. I was teaching a class for a local shop here in Portland called Sea Grape Apothecary. And the class was called Queer Devotion. And it was about, working with various queer deities and like doing devotion queerly and stuff like that. And the PDF I made for that class was like 25 pages long and just like packed full of information. And their events coordinator at Sea Grape was like, this should be like a whole book. And I was like, oh, maybe it should. And then I wrote Queer Devotion. And like the novel I'm working on right now literally came to me in a dream, which I didn't think was a real thing that like happened to people. It's never happened to me before.
Oh, it's very, very real.
But it happened. I'm usually a person that doesn't really remember my dreams. So that was like a major surprise. But I remember having this dream about this like queer immaculate conception, and waking up and being like, oh, holy shit. And like literally getting up at like 3 a.m. and like writing the whole dream down because I was like, I feel like this is something. And so then the novel that I'm working on came out of that. So have they always been in me? Maybe, but I think that I've needed like these invitations to sort of like unlock them. And so I think that there is definitely like I've learned to sort of like listen to the universe when it's talking to me and when it's like, maybe you should make a tarot deck. Maybe you should write this book. Here's a weird ass dream. Go for it. Yeah. Yeah.
I have to tell you, Charlie, Ash is in the chat saying that she has been reading Radical Tarot and it's truly an excellent guide to deepening the cards. So I just wanted to speak that out loud. Charlie, do you have a copy of Fifth Spirit with you?
Yeah. I'm
Okay.
so glad that I'm actually wearing real pants right now because I'm about to
Very good. You go grab it, and in the meantime, Sanyu, I can't let you pass by without asking about quantum witchcraft. I mean, when we were going back and forth before today, you told me your personal practice is quantum witchcraft, and there's no fucking way I'm leaving here without hearing about that.
Yes. Quantum witchcraft is the way I think about it is using yourself and your experience as a form of divination, right? Like you can use yourself like a pendulum. In Congolese tradition, there's a thing called knocks, and it's like things your body does or ticks that you have that indicate to you that a certain energy or presence or thing is happening. So it's like, oh, my head leans to the left when I'm thinking about this energy, or the back of my back feels warm when I'm thinking about this. So there's already many divination types of this, but I've organized mine around like sort of auric sigils where I create what people would call mantras. I call auric sigils, right? Because it's not in the tradition of the mantra. So I create linguistic spells that you can use to sort of orient your life and yourself as the thing that you're using to inform yourself about what needs to be done, right? So quantum witchcraft is based upon several tenets, but one of those tenets, me being Taoist, practicing Ifa Yesheshe, also being a part of Bashar org and like having a lot of interesting connections from that community that over the course of my life and not even knowing that, has created a reality where you don't invalidate what you don't prefer, that existence takes all kinds. And so the idea is not to use, and in Taoism, this is the case too. Like there's in the Tao Te Ching, a passage is like, do you think you can improve the world? I don't think it can be done. The world is perfect. And it's your perception of the world that imperfects it, right? So people are what they are. They have a right to themselves. They have a right to whatever they choose to believe about themselves and for themselves. And that's just not our job to change, but it is our job to use, And so quantum energetics is, how do I use what I don't prefer in a way that I do prefer so I still get the benefit of the experience, I like to say that, yeah, that like you need an ego because you have an identity, but like neutral ego is all verbs. I sleep, I eat, I love, I laugh, I die, right? It's like the Fool card. All presence,
Yes.
no worry, no anxiety, everything I give to the moment. And so I don't worry about the next moment because I know I'm going to give it all. And I don't worry about the past moment because I know I gave everything that version of me had to give. But a master of personality is like, how do I use everything that has happened to me to become more of who I prefer to be myself? And then a master of negative personality is, how do I use everything that has happened to me as a reason I cannot be who I truly am, right? So quantum energetics is sort of navigating that reality.
I don't want to put any more on your plate than you already have, but I will buy the shit out of quantum witchcraft as soon as you write it. I'll give you some time, but like pre-ordered.
Awesome. I wrote a chapter on it in A Confluence of Witches, which is
Oh
Casey
yes,
Zabala's
of
book.
course.
It's around here somewhere. That's why I'm looking around.
I
I'm
know,
like,
me
what
and
all
now
my
I'm
books?
looking around too. Like I have it right.
I have
It's
a chapter
here.
in there. Yes. So I have that. But yeah, I definitely will expand into a book. But it's an interesting practice because I'm not so much, I mean, I have tattoos of words and I love casting intentions with my words and casting spells in this way, but I'm not super like practical magic, hocus pocus. I'm not out here casting and manipulating through. I mean, I grew up in a concrete jungle, so like maybe if I had like had woods at my disposal and shit, I would have been much more of that leaning. But I'm from a place where even the palm trees are not indigenous. So I'm like, okay, I'll use what I have, which was myself, and all the answers are in you. I think of it as the scene in The Fifth Element where she's like, the stones are in me, the opera, the diva. The stones are in you, okay, but like you need to know that, trust that, and okay, last principle of it is that you use existence to trust existence. Whereas a lot of people use existence to not trust it, but you're right, you're still using existence. So I trust existence because it's infinite and it made me. So I don't know why I shouldn't. And it, makes life a little more funny than cruel.
Oh, spirit definitely has a sense of humor. There's no question about that.
It's got a perverted sense of humor. Very
Kate.
Kinky. It's
Kate. Kate, Brienne is here.
I am here.
Oh my gosh, hi.
For those listeners, Brienne is the one who introduced me to Kate. So that's cute. Thank you. Brienne, do you have a question for our word witches?
I do. First of all, big fan of all of you, so yay. If you could go through time or history and talk to a word witch that influenced your work, who would you want to meet? I'll mute myself now.
I'm gonna take a wild guess, like Emily Dickinson, Audre Lorde, Oscar Wilde. Anyway, that's just a wild guess.
Did you literally just read our minds? Because like, I don't know which one you're pointing at, but I was thinking of Oscar Wilde.
Yeah.
I was thinking of Emily Dickinson, so.
That's funny. I was thinking of Lao Tzu.
Very good.
Or Nina Simone, but Audre Lorde, of course, as well.
Yeah. But now I want, like, were those the answers that you actually would have given if I hadn't interrupted you?
I was literally thinking of saying Oscar Wilde, although Audre Lorde, absolutely. But yeah, Oscar Wilde was top of mind for me. Yeah.
I was moving between Lorca and Emily Dickinson.
Do you want to expand?
I just love Lorca's theory and play of duende so much, and it's just been such an influence in my life. And if you haven't read it, I just recommend it. And Emily Dickinson was the first poet that I remember reading with my dad. Like he was this like Emily Dickinson for young people book. And like we had the dictionary out, like Sanyu was talking about. It was like, what words don't we know? We're gonna go look them up in this grimoire. And it was just, she's just her envelope poems. I love her gorgeous nothings. Like I memorized the poem "I'm Nobody, Who Are You?" and when I was 7, and I can still do it. And it's just like that is my yeah. So thanks for reading my mind. Amy, who would you pick?
Oh, um, Emily Dickinson, Oscar Wilde, and Audre Lorde. And we'll have dinner together and it'll be fucking amazing. I would have to probably put Kurt Vonnegut in there. E. E. Cummings. I want to talk to E. E. Cummings about line breaks and punctuation. Charlie, do you have an E. E. Cummings quote tattooed on you?
I do. It's the last two lines of his poem that starts with I thank you, God, for this most amazing day, for the leaping green leaf spirit of trees and the blue true dream of sky, etc. But it's the last two lines from it, which are now the ears of my ears awake, and now the eyes of my eyes are opened. So
This is, listeners, word witchcraft. We
yeah.
are fucking psychics. We are claircognizant. We are tattooing each other's favorite poets on our bodies. We'll take one more question, and then Charlie, will you pull a card from your deck to sort of send us off? Great. Jasmine. Jasmine's a
I
teacher and is super stoked on the teacher love that was coming through.
I just got back from work and I'm co-parenting tonight. So I love to read and write, and I wanted to ask the guests, when you were little, what is the first book? Because I'm surrounded by little ones this year. What is the first book that made you go, oh, I really love this? So mine was when I was 4, I got a book called Happy Birthday, Little Witch from my aunt, who replaced all the pictures of the witches with pictures of my family. And I still have it. So there's a little, but yeah, I would like to know, as a teacher who this year is teaching the littlest, supporting the littlest of kids, what is the book that you can remember, maybe your first book that you went, wow, I really love this?
I'll start while everybody unmutes. Shel Silverstein, Where the Sidewalk Ends, and A Light in the Attic. His sense of humor to my like 5-year-old brain was so compelling. Sanyu is holding up a copy of Where the Sidewalk Ends because of course you are, Sanyu. But yeah, that's like it's funny because I have degrees in English literature and journalism and all that stuff. And people ask me, who is your favorite poet? And I still say Shel Silverstein. Because his work was so evocative for me, and the illustrations, and just I've memorized so many of them. So I know you didn't ask me, Jasmine, but I'm here too. So that's my answer. Sanyu, Charlie,
Your
Kate.
opinion super matters. I mean, I can
Thank
still
you.
quote "Pickle me, pickle me, pickle." I can still quote lots of Shel Silverstein poems because it's memorable. For me, I really like Anansi's folk tales. Obviously, that's why I chose to learn to read. But why I like Anansi is because he's an imperfect protagonist. He's a trickster. So like Rumpelstiltskin, his job is to get himself into trouble and to get himself out of trouble. And I think it embraces children's spectrum of ethics, and still the inevitable happens. Like when you trick people, they don't like it. And that's why Nancy always ends up getting called out. And so I really like those stories. And there's so many different versions of those folk tales that you can find in various books.
Yes. Kate, Charlie, first whispers.
Yeah, my mom used to read me this book called Kate's Giants, and it was about this little girl, Kate, who had night terrors like I did. I was so afraid of the dark. And basically, like the lesson of the book is if you can think them up, you can think them out. So it like taught me the power of imagination on both ways. And I still think that to myself, like, okay, if I can think it up, I can think it out. And Thank you, Kate's Giants.
Yeah, what a powerful like anti-anxiety tool.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Charlie.
Yeah.
I've been trying to think of something from like young childhood, but I don't actually remember a lot of my young childhood for reasons. But I mean, my mom used to read me poetry when I was going to bed or just whenever. That's one of the reasons I have that E. E. Cummings poem on my arm, is because it's one of the ones that she would recite all the time. I actually had it memorized before I ever saw it written on a page. And so sometimes when I'm reciting it, I actually get words like wrong or flipped because it's the way my mom would say it instead of the way it was actually written. But she would also read me Walt Whitman, Leaves of Grass, as like a little bitty kid. So, you know, thank you, Mom.
And she's like, here's some queer iconography for
Uh-huh.
you, young child. Yeah.
And then she like had no idea that I was queer until I told her when I was 30. She knew somewhere deep down. I know she did. But
I'm not even sure Sappho is a lesbian, so
don't you dare, Amy. Don't even. Yeah, but I can't remember. I mean, I know there was this one picture book that I was obsessed with for a while that was called Gwynna, but I can't remember anything about actually the plot of it. I just remember there's like a girl with wings on the cover, you know. So Walt Whitman and E. E. Cummings, I guess.
will you pull us a card for Word Witches Everywhere from Fifth
Absolutely.
Spirit? And while you're doing your little shuffle, Sanyu, Kate, start thinking about what you want to tell our listeners about how to support you. Sanyu, I know you've got a Patreon. Kate, obviously your book is available for pre-order. Start thinking about that as we shuffle. And we'll wait for Charlie to pull a card. No rush. The spirit will flip the card out when it's ready to.
I just flipped half the deck exactly when you said that.
Perfect.
Yes. I was going to say shout out to all the moms who read to us and mothers, whatever the gender.
My mother had me under the guise of helping her memorize. I was about 8 years old and I memorized Macbeth's soliloquy, the tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow one. Obviously, I still know. She was like, I want to memorize this, help me. And I'm like 8 years old reciting it, trying to like ostensibly help her memorize it. She still doesn't know it, but I know it. So yes, thank you, Sanyu, for shouting out those like parents, teachers, witchy aunties who get us those books, who read us those stories, who encourage us to memorize soliloquies and poetry.
I love that you can still recite it and she can't.
Of course.
I pulled the King of Wands for us from the Spirit.
What does that mean to you?
I mean, for me, this is a card that's very much about creativity. It's wands, right? Which is the suit of passion. It's the suit of like of energy, of creativity. I think of wands and cups as kind of working together in the creative realm, but wands is like the fiery inspiration side, the like active, I'm going to do something about this inspiration side, and cups, the water is like that sort of channeling and emotional, like the feeling behind the creative work that we do. But the King of Wands and as well as the Queen of Wands are very much like the doers, the creators, you know. I think that the reason we've got the king here instead of the queen is because in Fifth Spirit, like I've got the king is holding that torch up high, and sort of like leading the way, carrying a flag, not an American flag, just in case that gets misunderstood somehow. And I think that the King of Wands, I mean, the King of Wands is also a leader. And so maybe it's showing up to remind all of us word witches that the things that we write, that the things that we put our intention behind and put out there and share with the world have the potential to lead other people, right? To bring other people with us, inspire us, show them the way forward for themselves. And it brings me back to something that we were talking about near the beginning about 2000 years from now, will our books still be read? Will they still be remembered? And I was thinking as we were talking about that like it doesn't even really matter if our specific books are still being read, because they will have been read by people who then go forth and create things that then other people will read, who will then create things that other people will read. So even if our books are completely forgotten, we're still leaving like a trail, like a legacy, right? And that's beautiful and important. So, King of Wands.
Thank you so much for just pulling the absolute perfect card. Sanyu, Kate, do you have any thoughts about the King of Wands before we move on to shameless self-promotion? And when I say shameless, I mean fucking shameless. Please brag about all the rad shit that you're doing and how people can support you. But if you have thoughts about the King of Wands, please add that to your speech.
Yeah. I like to think of wands as the suit of learning the difference between embodiment and performance. And I read my aces high, so my ace is above the king. But King of Wands for me is an advocate of passion, meaning like, hey, I love this thing. I'm going to go do this thing. If you need to find me, that's what I'll be doing. Whereas when it's reversed, it's like, isn't this thing that I want you to do with me the most special thing in the world? And whatever you wanted to do is dumb, but you should come do what I'm doing, you know? So the upright king is like, I'm passionate about this thing. I'm going to go do this thing. And leading by example, I suppose. And so that's all I would add to that.
And what about your infinite radness? How can our listeners support you, pay you?
Yes.
Tell us about your album, which is fantastic,
I love that you
listeners.
brought that up. The album life is a different life in a way. I mean, obviously, I wrote all the songs, so
Yeah.
there's that aspect of it. But yeah, I did release an album, Shipwrecked. I put all my relationship songs on one album, and then I was like, I'm done with it. I'm not singing about relationships anymore. It's all on one album called Shipwrecked, which is relationship wrecked.
Yeah, it's so clever.
You
Shipwrecked.
know,
It's so clever.
getting using them as buoys to get to the land, using the little shards and shattered things. So I love that. Listen to that. That's on all the platforms. I'm writing a book, The Cultural Roots of Tarot. I'm going back to Italy in next week to go to the Florence archives and the Venetian archives, where they have things from the 5th century onward. And I'm going to look at the cargo maritime records. I'm going to see who was shipping what to who, and I'm going to see what the fuck was on the boats. And I did an Indiegogo campaign for that, which is over. However, if you go through my links on sanyuestelle.com, you can still find ways to, as I like to say, like the folktale, help me bake this bread. Like the hen who went around to all the animals and was like, do you want to help me make the bread? And everyone was like, nah, you can help me make the bread.
Yes.
It costs money to pay translators, which I have to do for Coptic and Arabic and Latin and Italian and all the languages of those ancient worlds. And I'll be writing the book through December and then editing it through release, I'm sure. Whenever it gets through, you all know more about that process than me. This is my first book with my name on it, so I'm very proud about that. Otherwise, my books are closed until October, because otherwise I'm never going to get this shit done. But I do readings in person in LA and virtually. I will be teaching quantum energetics again, which is my methodology for quantum witchcraft. And
You have a Patreon?
Yes, I have a Patreon. Thank you. I have a Patreon where you can get the cheapest readings from me. I do a monthly read there, but also if you're at the top tier, which is $10, you get a card pulled every month, which is really the cheapest way to access me. And other than that, the book will be out in fall 2026, Red Will Wiser. So do read, have me on your things, tell me to come to your town, tell your local bookstores to carry my shit, all those wonderful things, and your local metaphysical witch stores. And that's my spiel. Thank you.
I'm so tempted to just like book the three of you for Mabon again next year, and we can see where all of these projects have gone and developed, because
I
obviously
love that.
I
Do
want to
it.
keep talking to the two of you, the three of you, for like the next 6 hours, but I'm not going to do that to you or our listeners. Kate Belew, the book is Word Witch. Pre-order it now. What else? Infinite Radness.
She's here.
Yay!
Yeah, so it's out October 7th. No readings to add to The King of Wands because I'm solely a tarot admirer, but both of those readings really resonated with me, so thank you for that. And what else? You can find me on Instagram at K8Belew. I'm over on Substack writing about word witchery.
You have a
Um,
newsletter.
yes, a newsletter that goes out
God,
weekly.
you people are terrible at self-promotion.
I'm like, what do I
Just
do again?
terrible.
Who am I? I'm down for Mabon next year. This has been so much fun, so much fun. And if you pre-order Word Witch, I'm going to have a little like pre-order launch party. If you go to my link, you just submit to Hachette the photo of the book or the proof of the book or whatever, and they'll send you a link. We'll do a writing ritual. We'll celebrate. It'll be a blast. Yeah.
Yeah. Infinite Radness. Charlie.
I think that being horrible at self-promotion is a prerequisite in order to be a writer. So we're all doing a great job at being writers. I mean, we work in like solitude basically most of the time, right? So self-promotion's hard.
That's why I'm here, babe.
Yeah. Yeah, my decks are Fifth Spirit Tarot and Queer Devotion. Nope, that's not a deck, that's a book. See? Horrible. My decks are Fifth Spirit Tarot and the Gay Marseille Tarot. And my books are Radical Tarot and Queer Devotion. Queer Devotion just came out a few months ago. And I have a Substack called Queerly Devoted, where I write about queerness, transness, transitioning, deities, a lot of stuff that I couldn't fit in Queer Devotion, because word counts are a thing. And yeah, like ostensibly I'm on social media at the.word.witch on Instagram. And something similar to that on Blue Sky. I can't remember.
Thank you. And of course, listeners, all of this will be in the show notes. I want to thank my guests again so much. And honestly, for me, the blank page is a challenge. And now I can reinterpret it, rewrite this personal history, and think of the blank page as an invitation. And listeners, poets, lyricists, essayists, novelists, researchers, to-do list makers, whatever you are writing, this can be an invitation to 1,000 years in the future. Thank you so much, Sanyu, Estelle, Charlie Burgess, Kate Belew, for being word witches, for having the bravery, whether you feel like it's brave or not, to put your work out into the universe, for me to eat and drink and feed myself with. I want to say happy equinox. I just want to thank you all so very, very, very much for being with me on this blessed day. Thank you.
Thank you for being
Thank
such an
you.
amazing host.
Yeah,
Informed
thank you.
questions. I was like, you read essays I haven't looked at since I wrote them. I was like, "Ah."
And thank you for
Well,
all of your amazing word witchery, Amy.
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
we are all in this together, my loves. We are all in this together. And as we always say, blessed fucking be.
Blessed fucking be.
Blessed fucking be.
Blessed fucking be.
You must be a witch.
If you want to support the Missing Witches Project, buy our books, New Moon Magic and Missing Witches, and our deck of oracles, the Missing Witches deck of oracles, or join the coven. Find everything you need to know at missingwitches.com.